big week for the podcast. We are quite literally on the road, and all week we are talking about what was the probably the most valuable exercise I did to get all of our entire firm on the same page around standardizing the work that we do for clients, standardizing how we approach sales, and building SOPs in a much more intelligent way than going down and building one for every single client. That ain't the move. So this week, we're running through how to build out a service library for your accounting firm with a level of detail that will capture all the little fiddly one-off things that you do for different clients that fall through the cracks. We put together probably the biggest resource template we've ever done that you can swipe to do this exercise in your firm. Whether you think you already have a service library built or not, super recommend you go through this process to ensure that you have captured the level of detail necessary to be able to build the SOPs and get the sales process nailed down as explicitly as it needs to be to turn around consistent client work. Super excited for this, honestly. This was a big project I undertook in my firm. I'm going to walk you through how I did the whole thing, whether you're a new firm or an old firm. Probably going to be a couple nuggets in here for you to help standardize what you're doing a little better. So come on in. Let's talk service libraries. I'm just going to warn you right now, this week, if you run a team, this is absolutely the kind of week where you're going to want to pull in a team member. If you're considering undertaking this project, it is an incredibly valuable thing to pull your team in on. Even if you try to do it yourself, the better version of this is the one where you have input from all of your team members and everybody feels like they've got some buy-in on the output. So don't put this whole thing on your back. If you do run a team, pull somebody else in. All right, the goal. By the end of this, you have a super detailed service library that also explicitly calls out all of these service items, the details that go into how you deliver a service to a client and how they differ across engagements. So the destination we want to be a database, it could be a spreadsheet, whatever it is, literally in a table, being able to have all of your clients on the rows and all of the super granular properties of the services that you deliver to them presented across the columns. And I'm not just talking, I do bookkeeping for this person, I don't do bookkeeping for the other person. I'm talking, what platform do you use? What's the expected close date? What is the frequency? How do you get the information you need to do the bookkeeping? Bookkeeping is one example of a top-level service. We've built out over 10 of them into this template that you can swipe. Capturing the most common properties that go into delivering these services and how they differ across engagements so that you can define each of these properties within the scope of each engagement. And I can tell you in the experience of my firm over the years, how we did that stuff just got a little bit more disparate as different people were making different promises to clients. And the destination ended up being that while we saw the value of SOPs and wanted to build all that stuff out, we literally had to build out SOPs that were unique to every single engagement, which meant that when a staff person picked up a new client to work on, they had to learn the whole thing from scratch. It wasn't enough to know how to use QuickBooks or Bill.com or whatever it was. They had to understand, well, how do I work with this client and who do I reach out to and what are the expectations around XYZ? Because we were doing them differently, which was a pain, but also because we didn't have a vernacular for defining what about this is different. So what we want to get to instead is, instead of having SOPs at the client level, we are going to define very explicitly all the various things that we do. And this could be just a few things. We could really lock it down. It could be a bunch of things, but we're going to define the SOPs at the service level rather than at the client level. Now, for newer firms where you came out of the gate and you were a little more locked down about here are the exact things that I do, I think you will find that even the quote unquote standardized or fully packaged firms, you're still doing different things like, though this person prefers this type of delivery and the other person drops their stuff off this way. That's the kind of stuff that we're capturing across every top level service that you provide. The big difference maker for me, like why this was a valuable exercise to do in my firm, and this was a really big undertaking for me to do it, it helped us get clear with the expectations the clients had of what we were going to deliver so we could get crystal clear on exactly what we're going to do for them talk about that in the sales and onboarding process, but then all of that makes its way back to our team so that we know that we're like actually executing on what they need. It improved our ability to charge for scope changes. It's very common that by the end of the year, you get more efficient in how you deliver services to that client, but along the way, you pick up more work. And like the inputs are kind of a wash because at the same time, you're getting more efficient, you're doing more work, but you're not charging anymore. This gives us a vernacular to say we were doing A, now we're doing B. And it's, in my experience, a little easier for the team to communicate when there needs to be a change of scope. This greatly simplified my sales process. This enabled me to get out of sales for the very first time. The first time I was able to pull another team member into the sales process and it went great, just blew my mind. That was such a big unlock, but it would not have been possible had we not gone through this exercise building out our service library. And it enabled us to lock down the onboarding process in a much more clear way that didn't just rely on using our most senior person who could just like figure that stuff out and make up the answers along the way. It locked down that process much more, so it became easier to train people on exactly what needs to be done in X scenario when they're coming on at this service level with sort of these considerations around how we're going to deliver the service. So we're setting more clear expectations externally and how we work with the clients, but also internally and how we standardize the work that we do by more clearly defining what exactly it is that we're doing. Okay, the resource that's down in the show notes that I was talking about earlier is a big old spreadsheet. It's actually a Google Sheet, but you can download it as an Excel file, however you want to use it. Today, I'm going to talk through the first 3 tabs in that resource, which is defining kind of the overall structure of like the framework of how I think about service libraries. And it's not perfect. And actually, for a lot of people, they're probably going to see this and feel like it's overkill for them. In my case, this is what I needed to unify all of the different things that we were doing for our clients. And when we went through this exercise and I put this in front of the team, they're like, this is freaking absurd. We're doing so many different things. And I was like, yeah, like that's kind of the point. That's the value of this exercise, is it's a visualization of how absurdly disparate all the different things we're doing for people is. And the effect that had when I put that in front of my team is it finally got us to a point where we could agree on how to start pulling that stuff together and get it a little more streamlined and standardized. Today's episode is sponsored in part by LiveFlow. LiveFlow's the tool that puts a little wee button up in your spreadsheet app. Whether you use Excel, whether you're into Google Sheets, puts a wee little button up there that lets you pull any QuickBooks online data that you have from clients into a spreadsheet. Imagine your spreadsheets now with access to all your client QuickBooks data. How can you use that? I'll tell you one useful way. Getting people information when you don't want to be in QuickBooks. Internal members of a company's team. Let's say you got a marketing manager and they're in charge of the marketing budget and need to be overseeing spend or something like that. You want that person in the QuickBooks file? You sure don't. But you know what I do want them to see? Marketing spend. It's a great example of like all these barriers and siloed pieces of information that are withheld from team members just because we maybe didn't have a good way to give them access to it. If the business owner is responsible for a set of KPIs, all of those KPIs need to be tied back to team members, where team members are like, okay, they have to do this, this, and this, or a collection of team members have to meet their goals in order for the business owner's KPIs to get to where they need to be. Well, how do we get really clear information to those team members? Access to the data that they need. And as you're advising clients, LiveFlow is a great way to carve up all of the data that lives inside of QuickBooks. Either pull out one-time snapshots or reports that will continue syncing alive on an ongoing basis. And then all I'm doing is I'm giving that person access to a spreadsheet, not the keys to the entire kingdom, right? Besides, QuickBooks got all sorts of like user limits, and I'm consuming those every time I add a person anyways. LiveFlow does a whole bunch of stuff, consolidations as well. That's one cool use case. You want to learn more? Check out a link in the show notes. Today's episode is sponsored in part by TeamUp, the folks that go out and find you amazing hires for your team in the Philippines. More knowledge bombs from TeamUp. We talked before about how the top mistake firms make when it comes to hiring people offshore is treating them as like this other part of their team. When hiring folks offshore is just kind of like adding one more member to your remote team. They really aren't any different. Mistake number 2 is making all this mental math around building an offshore team just more complicated than it needs to be. At the end of the day, you're hiring people, you're developing people, you're training people to do a thing. And whether they're offshore or onshore, man, that doesn't really look any different. I know firms whose most senior technical people are offshore. I know firms who actually use offshore folks in a bunch of client-facing roles. I know I've shared I hired a bunch of offshore people when I was running my firm, and I came into it with all of the, ignorant, embarrassing questions that you would expect to have not having done it before. And very quickly it became clear, my team actually had all those concerns too. They were kind of spooked about the notion of us pulling in offshore folks. Very quickly, as these new hires were just part of our team and in our meetings and all that, everybody's like, oh, this is actually fantastic. We've been looking for people that can do this stuff for a long time and not being able to make those hires onshore. Or we've been talking about, this person wanting to move into something more valuable, but it means giving up the tasks that they have and trying to find someone who can take that stuff over. Man, offshore hiring was a godsend for us. Don't overthink it. They're people. Team Up can help you find awesome peeps. You pay Team Up a one-time recruiting fee. That's it. Nothing ongoing. That person's just part of your team now. Learn more about that one. Check out the link down in the show notes. So, my hierarchy for how I talk about like the vernacular of what goes into a service library, it has 5 tiers of increasing levels of detail. At the bottom of this hierarchy are the most granular, itty-bitty little details about how you deliver that service. At the top is the most simplified version that we present to our clients. So 5 tiers. Again, recommend you grab the resource in the show notes. I'm going to try to be as clear as possible about this because I know a lot of folks tune into this and don't, they're not going to have a second monitor open when they're listening to this or something. So tier 1 is packages. Packages are the collection of services that we present to a client in the context of a proposal. Packages can be either explicitly defined and always the same for every single client. So for example, maybe you've got a 3-tier set of packages that are on your website, and you call it, it doesn't really matter what you call it. We're just going to say bronze, silver, gold. You could set that up in a way so that it is the exact same for every single client that you work with. What the bronze package is considered as is the same for all of your clients. Or you can do what I did, which is basically package up something that is bespoke for each of our clients because we were a little more on the white glove end of the spectrum. Some clients need a bill pay. Some clients needed the financials by the 5th of the month versus the 20th of the month. The reality was in my case, we were serving so many clients with differing needs that we presented packages, but those were not like static packages that would be the same from client A to client B because client A had different volume and that one-off thing that they needed, or monthly payroll versus weekly payroll for the other one. So tier 1 is packages. This is how we present what we do externally. It can be different client to client, or it could be standardized. Your bronze, silver, gold is always the same for everyone. Second tier below this is service levels. This is what we called, instead of bookkeeping, we would call it bookkeeping 1, bookkeeping 2, bookkeeping 3. And it was a vernacular that we used internally that had significance to my team because they knew exactly what bookkeeping 2 was. They knew what payroll 3 was. It was like a shorthand representation of the collection of all of the details that go into delivering that service. And we're going to talk more about what those details are, but the second tier there is service levels. If you go up a tier to tier 1, packages that we just talked about, a package is a collection of service levels. So to give you an example, maybe my bronze package in a tax firm is clean up bookkeeping 1. We're going to clean up their books once a year right before we do tax prep, and then tax preparation 1. That is a package that is a collection of 2 service levels. Clean up bookkeeping 1, tax prep 1. Example of the gold package for the same tax firm. These are examples I'm pulling from the spreadsheet. Maybe the gold package for that same tax firm is bookkeeping 1, tax prep 1, and tax planning 2. I got a bookkeeping firm example here as well. Maybe the gold package for a bookkeeping firm is bookkeeping 2, payroll 2, 1099 prep 2, and bill pay 1. So you have service levels, that is a service, and then a tier of the service. I'm using numbers. Pick whatever you want. That's kind of the fun here is you can choose your own adventure, but all those service levels get rolled up into a package. So package is tier 1, service level is tier 2. Tier 3 are services. So top level services. We've got a big old list. In fact, I'll cruise through it real quick because we've literally built out all of these for you in the resource template. Top level services that I've identified, trying to capture the most common stuff for firms. Bookkeeping, cleanup bookkeeping, tax prep, 1099 prep, business personal property tax, tax planning, invoicing as in accounts receivable, payroll, bill pay, receipt management, document management, entity management, think like Secretary of State filings, entity setup, VCFO, tech advisory, sales tax, cash reporting. These are all examples of like top level services that we can deliver in different ways to different clients. Because I deliver my bookkeeping service, at different levels in different ways with varying levels of veracity, could be annual, could be monthly bookkeeping. Because we deliver it differently, we use service levels, the second tier in the hierarchy, the one above this, to create like a language for what, a monthly bookkeeping engagement looks like versus annual. So tier 1 is packages. Tier 2 is service levels. Tier 3 is those services. And this is where it gets interesting. There's 5 tiers, by the way. Again, this is the first tab in the spreadsheet that's available in the show notes. Tier 4 is service items. So we're now just below services. What are service items? Well, the items are kind of all of the properties of that service that define how you deliver it to a specific client. So to give you a really basic example, let's say it is a bookkeeping service. What are some properties of a bookkeeping service? And this is what we're calling service items in this kind of vernacular. How about frequency? How often are you going to do the books? Is it going to be monthly? Is it going to be quarterly? Is it going to be annually? Frequency is a service item of the bookkeeping service. How about accounting platform? We're doing this in QBO and Xero and NetSuite. Boy, that ought to make a difference in how our SOPs are developed, right? Or how we sell it. So it's a service item that's important to track. Accounting method, cash, accrual, hybrid. Report package, what is delivered? Is it the boilerplate stuff out of QuickBooks? Is it, a report package from Fathom or Reach or something else? Delivery method. This is a big one that we don't usually track. Are financial statements sent via email, just a PDF? Are they sent via a Loom video, via a live Zoom meeting, an in-office meeting, an in the client office meeting? Are they not delivered at all? Delivery method, that's an example of a service item, a property of how we deliver the service that we need to be tracking on each engagement. How about close speed? The way I tracked this was number of business days after the period end, because we used to say like, we'll do it by the 10th or the 15th or something like that. And whether that was realistic actually came down to how many business days there were. So we kind of just rolled that back and said, no, we're actually going to define this as X number of business days after period close. You can do it either way. Doesn't really matter. What I'm trying to call out here is thinking about what are all the specific properties of how we deliver a service so that we can capture that and have crystal clear expectations for our team of how we deliver it. Those are kind of some of the biggies that we've identified in the spreadsheet. Other possible ones here, how you gather information. Is it self-service in the banking login, or do they have to give you that stuff? The number of stakeholders when you're managing uncategorized transactions. For example, am I bouncing questions off of a single owner, or am I going through an Amex statement and having to gather information from 15 stakeholders in the business as to what those transactions are? Class or location tracking, potentially transaction or account volume. These are all service items within the bookkeeping service. And so what this looks like in the spreadsheet and the service library template we've developed is there is a bookkeeping tab, and the tab lists a whole bunch of potential service items you could track. You don't need to track all of these. And this is one area where it may make sense for you to go super deep. In my case, in my firm, it did make sense to go super deep. Or it could make sense to just keep this high level. Maybe you just want to grab, frequency, platform, delivery method. Like maybe that's enough for you. In my case, we went super deep with the goal of simplifying this over time. And when we had the framework, we could propose alternatives to clients and be like, hey, instead of this weird thing that we're actually doing for you, I'm just going to do this thing that's only a little bit different, but then is the same as what I do with 20 other clients. Like that was the value of this exercise. Now, for each of these service items, the fifth and last tier in this hierarchy is the service item options. That is, what are the different options for platform, for example? So to go back through the bookkeeping service example and show you what these service options look like. For frequency is a service item. The service item options for frequency are annual, quarterly, monthly, basically whatever you're willing to do for clients. The service item options for accounting method, probably cash, accrual, hybrid. The service item options for delivery method. What are all the ways that you deliver financials to clients? Maybe you only do email or Loom video. Maybe you only do live meetings. The options for that item are the fifth and final tier of the hierarchy. So if you think about a flow chart at the top being simple, at the bottom it's at its most complex, where we're defining what are all of the different ways that we do this for people today with the goal of getting us on a path to hopefully reducing the volume of like service item options. That's kind of That's kind of the ultimate goal, is at the bottom of that flow chart where it's super wide and it's a ton of nodes of all the different ways that we deliver these services to people. Hopefully when you do this exercise, this is the biggest and the ugliest that ever is. And now that you have like a vernacular with the team of here are the different ways that we do this stuff, you can define a path to simplifying and say, okay, this thing, we are no longer doing annual bookkeeping, right? Maybe we're no longer going to do that because it oftentimes hits during our busiest season. It's like the clients who aren't willing to pay very much for it, so we can't make any money on it. Then that gets really clear. And you can literally go to your client list and see who is everyone who has the bookkeeping service with the service item frequency and the service item option annual. And there you go. You've got every single client for whom you do that very specific thing. Now, we're only talking about bookkeeping here. This looks different for every single service you deliver, down to payroll. Who's making sure that the retirement employee and employer deferral is correct every single pay run? Is it up to the client to notify us, or is it up to us? Or do we look at an invoice to confirm? Who's making the retirement contributions? Is that integrated in the payroll platform, or is it in a separate platform? That's the level of detail we've gone to building this out. And this was the level of detail I had to go to with my firm to clearly define exactly how we were supporting people with the goal of then simplifying. And I'll say this again, and this may feel like wildly involved and like a whole ton of work, but it's all the work that we're doing right now. Like that's why it's an exercise worth doing, is we're doing an absurd amount of work to like handle this stuff differently for all of our clients. And until we like kind of get our arms around all of it, that's this exercise, is getting our arms around all of it. Until we do that, it's really hard to simplify and pare that back into kind of a common language and a common approach. This episode is sponsored in part by Cloud Accountant Staffing. I got another resume for you, an example of the super talented accountants in the Philippines that Cloud Accountant Staffing will find for you, bring to you to become valuable members of your team. How about a tax hire? Let's do a tax person today. This one's a CPA and a certified tax technician. That's actually a Philippines thing. Got their start in audit and you went to tax. Good for you, as you should have. 2 years of experience doing tax work for U.S. individuals and companies. Prepared 1040s, 1065s, 1120s, 1120s. Fixed assets, communicated directly with clients to gather information. Conducted independent research on applicable tax stuff as needed. Experience with ProConnect Tax, RC reports, Corby tax planning. Just a few years removed from school. Man, this is the type of person where I would try to sink my teeth into him super early. The hires we made in the Philippines were so good, like so capable. We had great luck with it. The way Cloud Accountant Staffing works, they have a call with you, talk about your needs, and then their recruiters on the ground in the Philippines will go find great applicants for your role. You decide if you want to interview them, and you only pay anything when you actually hire somebody. It is like win-win. You kind of don't have anything to lose because you're only going to cut a check when you've found somebody that you've fallen in love with, that you want to be part of your team. To learn more about Cloud Accountant Staffing and get some like real life resumes like this, check out the link in the show notes. This episode is sponsored in part by Uncat, my 2021 new tool of the year. Man, it has just gotten better since then. We recently did a 5-minute demo of the latest cool new Uncat features on my YouTube channel. If you're not familiar with Uncat, it handles the uncategorized transaction problem. So basically you point Uncat at any set of accounts in the client's chart of accounts. Anytime any transaction hits those accounts, like Ask My Accountant, Uncategorized, that sort of thing, it gets pulled into Uncat, and then on a notification schedule that you choose, like once a week, your client gets an email notification. It says, I need you to provide some clarification on these transactions. They click a magic link in that email, don't have to log in or anything like that. It takes them straight into Uncat, and they provide whatever details you need. Now, you can ask them to just give you a text description. You can ask them to try to pick what account it ought to go into, to upload a receipt, to pick a class, to pick a location, and you can make any of those things mandatory. So just imagine if you set up some bank rules that put stuff like Amazon transactions, sets them to automatically classified uncategorized. You could touch that client's books once a quarter, and every single week your client's gonna be getting notified of the transactions you need more info of without you even having to get into the accounting file. But wait, there's more. You can add as many client users to a company as you want. Let's say you got 5 people at the clients that have their own credit cards, and you got to track all that stuff down every month. You can set all of the transactions specific to payment methods to go to specific users. What? They recently rolled out custom requests. So you can actually ask for any old thing, questions, documents, whatever, via that same Uncat experience. And they recently rolled out receipts. They will auto-match receipts to transactions that are in the accounting ledger. So the client emails a receipt in, uploads one to Uncat, SMS messages a receipt in, and Uncat will find the transaction that's associated with in the ledger. All you gotta do is confirm the match, and it'll actually push that receipt into QuickBooks, Xero, whatever you're using. Super cool tool and easy to start with a single client. Like, doesn't require changing a whole practice management system or something. You've actually got a free 7-day trial. You don't even have to give them your card. You go to uncat.com, check that one out. Take it for a spin with your firm even to get comfortable with it. Really cool tool. That's Uncat, UNCAT, like a kitty. So to kind of land the plane here, I want to circle back to the packages example. And this is, I think, the third tab in the spreadsheet that is in the show notes. To sort of land the plane, I want to go back through this bronze, silver, gold example for a tax firm and for an accounting or bookkeeping firm. Why don't I start with the accounting or bookkeeping firm, just to think through what does this actually look like in practice when I've done this exercise for my firm, and what are the ways in which it's helpful. So, an example for an accounting or bookkeeping practice, I got a bronze package here. So the package is tier 1, that's kind of the top level, how we communicate the collection of services that we're going to deliver to a client. This bronze package example, the only thing that's in it is Cleanup Bookkeeping 1. Once per year, we review client-prepared books. The service level is Cleanup Bookkeeping 1. The service itself is Cleanup Bookkeeping. A few examples of service items that you would define here. Frequency, annual. The accounting platform, Xero. Maybe the volume of transactions per month, 100 to 200. Accounting method, cash. That's how we've defined exactly what we're going to do for that client. Now, silver package. There's a little more to this one. Silver package includes Bookkeeping 1. So not Cleanup Bookkeeping, but Bookkeeping 1. Service items within this. Platform, Xero. Frequency, quarterly. Intake, banking self-service. We have access to the bank. Delivery method, Loom. Close date, 25th. But also in this silver package, it's not just Bookkeeping 1. It's also Payroll 1 and 1099 Prep 1. So within Payroll 1, basically we'll process your payroll for you biweekly. So the service items within Payroll 1, platform is Gusto, frequency biweekly, volume 10 to 20 employees. Intake method, fax. Why not? They're going to fax us hours. Medical deductions. I've got client-led. Basically, the options there are either we're reviewing an invoice or the client's telling us when that needs to change. And then the third service within this silver package, 1099 Preparation 1. We will prepare 1099s for you at year end. Service items within this, volume 0 to 10 1099s. W-9 gathering. This needs to be a service item here too. This is going to be up to the client. They're tracking down W-9s. Probably want to define the platform that you're using to prepare the 1099s, and then who's responsible for delivery. I've got client down. The gold package example for this firm, more or less the same. Bookkeeping 1 goes to Bookkeeping 2. The difference being you're doing it monthly, and the only other difference here is delivery method is Zoom meeting. Again, this is all hypothetical stuff that's going to look different for your firm. Payroll 1 goes to Payroll 2. The main difference being we are taking the lead on tying out medical deductions. 1099 Prep 1 goes to 1099 Prep 2. Main difference being we are gathering W-9s from their vendors. And then with this gold package, we add Bill Pay 1. We will pay bills for you weekly. The service items in that service, volume of bills between 0 and 30 per month. The platform's bill.com. The frequency is weekly. Payments are made by the client. Vendor communications are managed by the client. And the intake method, how we receive these bills, are email. Again, the way that you deliver this service could be totally different. How you define the service level is completely up to you. The value of this exercise is going through and defining the services that you provide, the items within that service that impact the way that you deliver it, and then getting explicit about how you do it for each of your clients. And maybe you want to do a bunch of different things for people, but I think this usually forces you to trend to simplifying and having more common ground between the ways that you deliver all those engagements. If you're sitting on a lawnmower right now, I recommend when you're back to your computer checking out this template that is in the show notes. It starts with just a visualization of that hierarchy that may make it a little easier to get your head around when you can just sort of see it. This is a great example of how there's probably 100 ways to skin this cat. And it's something that's probably been done a bunch of different ways. This is the way that I did it that worked for my firm. Take all of it, take part of it, but go through your version of the exercise to get the entire firm on the same page about exactly what it is that you do for your clients. So we're going to go deeper on this over the next 3 days. Today is kind of showing you that hierarchy and understanding the language around it. Tomorrow, we're going to talk through mapping what you already do to this hierarchy. So we'll go through some examples of how you build out these service items for a specific service that you deliver, be it tax planning or bill pay or payroll. We're going to go through those examples, not for you to necessarily just copy paste exactly what I've got, but it's probably a helpful starting point, but to think about all the engagements you have right now and what the variables across those different engagements are that we can capture and make a note of, so that collection of services that you have for that client are actually representative of what you do for them at a much greater level of detail than just, yeah, we do their bookkeeping and we do their tax return. Like, we're trying to get beyond that to more explicitly set the expectations for the team of how this work gets done. So tomorrow, we're going through the exercise of mapping that for the work that you do. Day 3, we're going to talk about how we then simplify those things into service levels, so that rather than having this huge complex web of, the bookkeeping has these 8 different properties and there's, a million different combinations of how all these properties can be different for our clients. The goal to get to is to then simplify that up into what's bookkeeping to. This is now the default and what my team understands bookkeeping to mean, so that we don't have to live down in that level of detail that we have to get into for this exercise. We can instead live up at kind of an abstracted, simpler version of it, while still having a way to capture the exceptions. Because a simplified version of it with, a field to outline the 1 or 2 things that are maybe unique about that's a big step forward from having to have an SOP that's unique to that client, right? So that's what we're talking about on day 3. And then day 4, we're really going deep on SOPs, at what level of that hierarchy you build SOPs so that you're not reinventing the wheel for every single client, right? And how those SOPs and the steps to delivering that specific service make their way to your practice management system, your task management system, so that as soon as somebody accepts a proposal that has that collection of service levels in packaged bronze, the exact tasks and all of the language of what goes back to the practice management system, your team understands. They can hit the ground running. They know exactly what they need to execute on for that client. That's what we're trying to get to. The first step is throwing a big old lasso around a big hot mess, which naturally happens when we don't have an explicit process for this. That's the start of this, is rounding up all that stuff, and then we kind of compress it. We simplify, we find ways to get those engagements on a more similar track so that it's easier to pull a team in to do that stuff efficiently. Big week, man. Like I said, if you run a team, pull the team in on this. Don't put this all on your back. Even if you do want to take the lead on it yourself, buy-in from the team will be better if they're involved in the process of just building this stuff out in the beginning. So that is it for day 1, kicking this off. I'll see you back here on day 2 to explore what it looks like to corral all that stuff and map out what you're doing today.